Hello, everyone. I let everyone coming a few seconds, but yeah, just wanted to say hello and and welcome to today's webinar entitled "Community-Driven Design System: Expanding Your Impact." Today, I have the pleasure to have zeroheight folks to answer and to discuss about this topic about community and design system, but also to answer all your questions that you may have in the audience. I think it can be a very interesting discussion that we all can have when it comes to to building a community around the design system and how to get adoption around your design system. But before starting, just a bit of housekeeping. There's a couple of things I want to share with you. The first thing is if you haven't yet joined our community, our Slack community, it's called Zeros, and it's the perfect place to continue the discussions that we are going to have today with all the community and zeroheight people. But it's also a great opportunity to get exclusive updates about the zeroheight product, to get the last features, for example. And it's a perfect place to ask any questions that you may have about your design system or about zeroheight to the zeroheight community, but also to get in touch with the zeroheight people directly. So as you can probably see that there is a link that pop up to join the Zeros community. Feel free to sign up and to join this lovely community, because today we're going to talk about community. During this webinar, if you have any questions, if you need any assistance, if you have any technical issues, feel free to message Connie, who is here with us in the chat directly. She will be happy to help you and try to answer any question or any issues that you may have. And this is a big question that we have when it comes to webinars. So are we recording this webinar? So yes, this webinar is currently being recording. And so don't worry, you will get the recording later. We will send you an email after the webinar so you can get the link and have access to the replay. And of course, you can share this webinar later with your colleagues, your friends, your family, anyone. Another point, and it's a bit unfortunate, but yeah, we can't really enable captions on this platform for the webinar, unfortunately. But however, we suggest you to use webcaptioner.com if you really want or need captions for this webinar. The only thing that I would suggest is that use your computer sound instead of your headphones to get the best experience with this webinar. And finally, I'm sure that everyone here is very nice, but it's always good to remind people that we have a code of conduct, and so basically it's just don't be a jerk. We want this webinar to be a safe place and nice for everyone. So just be kind with, and everything should be fine. We have some exciting upcoming events that are coming. First, if you haven't heard yet, we have the Design System Awards that we launched a few months ago. You can still apply to one of the 8 categories that we have. The entry deadline is 1st September. So if you want to submit your design system, or if you have a talk or a plugin, anything that can be related to your design system or to the design system community, now is the time, to apply and to get a chance to be selected and be one of the first to win to this Design System Award competition. We are also running an event in September. It's going to be our second edition in the UK. about Converge. It's on the 21st September, and it will be in Manchester. We already have an amazing panel featuring Gina Ain, Amy Yu, Morgan Peng, and more people who will be speaking about different design system issues and topics. You can still have some tickets, and you can also get tickets for a workshop that is the day before, hosted by Amy Yupen. And we also have another event that we will be attending if you also get the chance to be in Copenhagen on 27 and 28 September at Design Matters. The Zero Height people will also be there, so yeah, come say hello to the team. And finally, it's time to introduce our speakers. I'll start by myself, and I will let the rest of the team to introduce themselves. But I'm Jules. I'm a design advocate at Zero Height. I'm mainly helping the community to build better design system, and I'm also, helping Zero Height to build their community around this product and the design system topics in general. I'm also based in Paris, in France, as you can probably guess with my accent. And I let Madeline, if you want to be the next one, to introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jules. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline. I'm the product lead here at Zero Height. So essentially my role now, I was a product manager kind of leading a squad until recently. So now I'm kind of helping connect the different departments within Zero Height to make sure that we're all on the same page and that, that product is really able to thrive in the way that we, of course, want to. So I'm originally from Minnesota in the US, as you can maybe tell if you're American and can recognize a Midwestern accent. But I live in Manchester in the UK now with my dog, Arthur. I'm trying to think. Jules, you didn't do a fun fact. Is this the time I'm supposed to say my fun fact?
Oh yeah, that would be great, but you're right.
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't throwing it in there arbitrarily. Fun fact about me, I have a degree in music composition, so nothing to do with product management, but I feel like that's usually the path for product managers anyway. So yeah, glad to be here.
Nice. Thank you, Madeline. Luke, do you want to be the next one?
Sure. Hi, I'm Luke. I'm currently the head of community and content at Zero Height, which means that I head up the advocacy team. My background's in product design, product management, and development as well. So a little bit of everything, which gives me a lot of background to just call everybody rubbish, which is fantastic. I also host Design Ops Island Discs, if you've listened to that, and will be the host for Converge up in Manchester. Originally from Sydney in Australia, now based just outside of London in the UK. And fun fact about me, I have given myself concussion via baseball, skateboarding, ice skating, and rollerblading in the past, and ended up in hospital for all of them. Probably explains most of my answers too.
Awesome. Well, Sienna, it's up to you.
Hi, so I'm Sienna. I'm a customer success manager here at Zero Height, so been here a bit over a year. I partner with our customers to help them build their design systems, as well as a big part of what I do is help them to promote adoption at their companies, so getting more people involved there. I'm originally from Hawaii, but I live in London now. And a fun fact about me is I've lived in 6 different countries. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I didn't realize we had such an international team of speakers today. Cool. Well, let's start. Have you, as a kickoff question for all of you, why do you think it is really so important, what it is so crucial, to build a community around a design system? how it can help and contribute to the growth and the evolution of a design system to have a community around it.
I'm very happy to jump in first here. I think for me, it's one of the things that I always advise. So I do a lot of teaching around design systems and talk to a load of different folks around, the best way to do design systems. And one of the problems that I often see happen in organizations, especially folks who have centralized design system teams, is that you end up as the design system team in this like ivory tower as this untouchable team that dictate to the masses what is going on, and you end up with this very us versus them mentality, which is a really great way to kill your design system and not have adoption, because you just don't have buy-in. So I think that, to me, like, one of the things that I always advise, the way that I see it, is you either have a design system with a good community around it, or you have an ineffective design system. That's the way that I see it, because if you don't have the community around the design system, you're never going to get good adoption, good buy-in, just because people don't care about something that then it's harder for people to care about something they're not actively involved in.
Yeah, I can follow up to that. Actually, Luke and I were speaking earlier about this, because I think like wearing the a product manager hat, especially at zeroheight, like I think that mindset is really embedded into how we think about building the product too, where it's like that's kind of our default, is to be like, you need a community, right? Like this shouldn't be this like centralized sort of separated thing. And so, I mean, I think my answer really is that, building a community around your design system really means that you'll have a better design system, right? I think it's another way of saying that you've garnered buy-in, and by proxy, sort of like adoption and contribution from a wider range of people. So I think that means really it's, it will be more well-rounded, it will be more accessible, and it will be more adopted by folks, I think, outside of maybe having it feel prescribed to them, right? It will feel like they're part of something, and they're more apt to contribute and to ultimately adopt the design system.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that I say a lot. Like, you can have the best design system in the world. If you don't have any adoption in the end, it's completely pointless, because it's all about humans who are behind the design system, and humans who use your design system. So in the end, it's all about community. So we talk about adoption as one of the benefits and key success of having this community. But how would you say that a community-driven approach for your design system can, enhance the collaboration between mainly designers and developers, but maybe other people, other stakeholders?
Yeah, I feel like this. Sorry, Sienna, were you about to say something? Okay, I'll be fast. I think this piggybacks a little bit on what I was just saying too, is that I think with a community-driven approach, it is essentially says, this is a tool, like a kind of internal living and breathing resource that is sort of for the people, by the people, kind of, right? So it's feeling like it's a resource that's for the greater good, and not something that's being prescribed. So I think that inherently means that adoption will be better, right? Because it's, again, saying this is a way to get more designers, more engineers, and ultimately stakeholders on board once they see the adoption, because it's something that's saying this benefits all of us, and it makes sense for all of us to want to contribute, as opposed to it being some rule to follow. So yeah, sorry, Sienna.
Kind of like piggyback on that, like with that, you have designers and developers and like different stakeholders working together to build this. So that automatically kind of enhances the collaboration there and encourages it, and kind of like sets a benchmark for other teams to follow and get involved. So it's just kind of like a snowball effect in a sense there.
I think it's also like shared language and shared understanding, right? I think that's really important. And I think that is one of the things that you need to think of, especially when you're talking about that collaboration between designers and developers, when you're thinking about how you build your community and how you foster your community, is making sure you aren't just building a community of one, like a very what's the word, basically you've got to build a diverse community for your design system. And in this case, you know, diversity in all ways, but especially in terms of like job title as well. So you've got to have designers involved in the community who care about it. You've got to have developers who care about it, PMs who care about it, marketing, content. I think that all of those things are really important. And if you don't have those people present within the like community activities that you run, you're not gonna have that level of shared language and shared understanding, and it's probably going to be harder to drive adoption with those people, because you don't have the champions that are there sort of helping you, you know, get that adoption. And it becomes a very like, you know, dictatorial way of running a design system.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because I feel like a lot of people, when it comes to design systems, think that design system is only, you know, something for designers or maybe for developers. And I can understand actually, because, you know, I think there's the main builders of the project and of the design of the design system in the end. But when it comes to community, is there like specific people that we should involve in this community? I suppose, you know, it's designers and developers, but you mentioned that maybe you know, if you want to foster adoption of your design system, maybe we should also federate people from, I don't know, communication or product management, or maybe HR, maybe, I don't know. Is there like specific, you know, champions, as you said, that you should, you know, convince or something?
I'm going to be curious to hear what Madeline thinks of this, but I'd say PM. Like, if you don't have your PMs on board, you're going to be a bit sort of screwed. Because, like, ultimately, in a lot of companies, it's the PMs who are, you know, dictating a lot of working practices and processes that are happening, who are, you know, the arbiters of, like, quality and, you know, what quality means. And, you know, are generally the ones who will slap people on the wrist if they're not doing it right as well. I do think that like PMs are pretty key. But then I think it's basically comes down to your design system. It's whatever you're gearing your design system towards. If your design system it has a lot of input from marketing, or you want it to have input from marketing, you need marketing folks in the community. If you have a lot of, you know, if you have a product that content is really important, make sure the content folks are involved in your community.
Yeah, I was going to say to your PM comment, I agree. I think also though that like I think the PM can sort of act as like that final gate if there isn't adoption happening too, right? Where it's like maybe not always final, but like I think that role can end up being almost like helping with some adoption. Sorry, my dog is cuddling up. Helping with some adoption issues, right? If it's obvious that when you're shipping things are inconsistent, or you know that some of these best practices that exist aren't being followed. So yeah, I agree with you, Luke, completely that it also really depends on like what are some of the key focuses of your design system, and also what are some of the key kind of participation and adoption challenges that you're having, and from there the question lies again, like who do we need to get involved to make sure that, you know, we're getting the most out of this.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like, you know, that design system is often about the brand in the end. Like it's almost, you know, you're touching the DNA of a brand, and either it's the marketing, either it's the communication department, or maybe it's the brand. But I feel like, you know, it's definitely people that you should, you know, get in your design system community to make sure that it will be adopted in the end, based on my experience at least. And if we are being a bit more, you know, practical, is is there any specific tools or maybe process that can help that can help driving this community building to ensure maybe to get maybe more adoption or to build this community?
Do you want me to just give you my plan?
Yes,
Um,
please.
No, I think to me, like there's a couple of key things that a lot of people don't think about, especially if you're starting, if you like sort of near the beginning of the journey, and you're in that sort of phase where you are sort of pushing for adoption. One is like have a communication plan. Have a communication plan and build one out. There's some great resources. You can Google design system communication plan, and I'm pretty sure Nathan Curtis has done a really great article on it. But basically, it's just around figuring out who your stakeholders are, figuring out what cadence of messaging they need, and figuring out what channels they need to be talked to in. And I think that it is very much you need to go for a user-centric approach. Like with that, you need to go where they are, not assume that they'll come to you and figure out what it is. So I think that's like the first thing. And then the second thing is get people involved, like get people involved as quickly as possible. And in terms of like what you get them involved in, it's kind of up to you. But I think that having like community champions around the business that are actually inputting into like roadmap, like design system roadmap, is a great way to get buy-in. To be honest, is what I probably advise most products do as well, is listening to your users and using user feedback to sort of define what you do next, especially for internal tooling. It's I think pretty important.
Yeah, just kind of going off of that, some of the strategies that like a lot of the customers that I work with have used that have been really successful is kind of doing like an internal roadshow, is essentially going where their audience is, like attending different product teams meetings, showing up, like going through the design system, the value in it, where to access it, any questions they might have, how they can get involved has been really helpful because you're going where they are, you're answering all their questions, and then they feel like they're contributing as well, has been really successful there too.
Yeah, I think even like a level lower than those things too, like being more granular. I think like, especially within your design system, like surveys or even sending one out. I know a lot of our customers do that kind of once a quarter, or even having something kind of like omnipresent in the actual design system. Again, not to shamelessly plug zeroheight, that's not the point of this at all, but just to say like one of our recent features is like integrating with Slack. So when you make a new release, you can kind of connect it to a Slack channel to say, hey, this is what's changed. I also think, in general, having a simple contribution process, right? So in addition to like this kind of communication plan, also knowing that, you're really sending the message that this is this kind of community tool. This is something that your voice matters. So when you do arrive at the design system, if that is, like I said, a survey or some, process you have even outside of the design system to gather contribution, to really, again, say like our doors are open. This is not just about this core team making decisions. I think goes a really long way as well.
Yeah, definitely. And if we are keeping this maybe more practical topic, I'm curious to see if you have maybe any tips or best practices about some effective ways to track and measure the success of this design system community or maybe adoption. Is there maybe some specific metrics or maybe indicators to consider when you want to measure this community? Not an easy question, I guess, but
No, you know what? I'll switch up the order because mine'll be brief. But I think, and this might be obvious, but I think like really defining what success, means to you, because I think that it can mean lots of different things, right? Like it could mean, I think we touched on this earlier, like maybe part of your design system is about like recruitment, right? And knowing that you want to kind of attract attention to, potential designers, or kind of like trying to get buy-in and showing that you take design really seriously at your organization. So that could be a metric, right? It could be about, like partnerships or getting involved with third parties. But I also think it tends to be things like, page views, even downloads of certain components, search terms, how long people stay within a session. Again, we have a feature at zeroheight that allows you to kind of vote on helpfulness of a page to kind of give you a glimpse into like quality of the documentation. So honestly, my 2 cents would be like, from the jump, it really is about, are people spending time in your design system, right? Like, I feel like that's the place to start. Like, are you able to tell, if certain pages are being viewed more, or if certain content you're putting out is not being visited as much, which again is like one-on-one, I guess, about kind of measuring and analytics. But I do think it's a good place to start, really. But yeah, really curious to hear what the other panelists have to say.
I think for me, especially on the like measuring the success or like impact of the community efforts, it's harder. And I think that it is, and actually it's going to come down to qualitative measures. Like that is I suppose you could probably, I think adoption probably is like a proxy measure for how effective the community is going, because I think it is pretty hard to maintain adoption if you don't, as I said before, like if you don't have a strong community. But I do think that like if you want a direct sort of read on how it is you just need to have some, user interviews with folks or surveys or I don't know, NPS scores after a meeting, after a regular meeting or something that you have. Like you can automate a lot of this as well, but having those like qualitative touch points. And the beauty of it is unless you're, I don't know, Salesforce, you're probably it's not gonna result in thousands of points of data, right? You're going to be able to analyze this pretty easily and pretty well. But it's basically asking people's opinions. And like, I don't know, I still think that a good measure on design systems as a whole, not just community, is like team happiness. Like team happiness and like a self-assessed view of how effective they think they're being. Because I think that like good design systems should affect team happiness and should affect like team retention and stuff like that. And I think that having a good community is probably also going to affect like wider team happiness.
Yeah, I feel like maybe, the way to measure it is probably more into, qualitative metrics more than, numbered in the end.
Yeah.
Sienna, you want?
Just wanted to add to that. It's definitely, I think, kind of echoing what both Luke and Madeline said, that it's definitely success depends on each individual team and how they defined it, as well as it's definitely very qualitative rather than quantitative. So like a lot of the customers that I work with when we're onboarding them kind of start with some of these questions just to get a baseline of where they are when they sign up. And it's very much based on how they feel. And a lot of them is like how the teams work together and communicate, whether teams are pretty siloed or they have that good communication, whether like they have how efficient like a product team might be, for example, as well. So I think definitely it's very qualitative, and there isn't necessarily like an exact science to it. Some of the teams choose like to use analytics as well. Like Madeline mentioned, like page views, unique viewers, stuff like that. So some of the teams I've worked with start with very low viewer count, and then they add as more products and stuff. You can kind of see that trend upward to measure the impact of the design system community. Another team that I worked with, they kind of did it in a different way where they measured it based on like this development velocity a little bit, because more teams adopted the design system. They'd kind of built that community. So you had mentioned before they had the design system, a project that would have taken their designers like 2 or 3 weeks. They got it up and running in a matter of days, because they got people to adopt the design system and had built that community. So I thought that was pretty impressive. But again, it's very much subjective.
I was going to say, I feel like this is a big question across the industry and so many different teams, right? Of like, how do you measure the impact of a design system? It's something we think about all the time. And I think maybe unhelpfully just to say that like, varies a lot with teams. I think it's hard to sometimes like package up in this perfect report, because a lot of it is kind of like, you know, velocity or some of these like fuzzier metrics. So I think that's why, you know, some people rely on like the cold hard data that they can measure, but that's like, how indicative is that really of like impact? So I mostly just want to say, like, I think there's lots of ways to go about this, but at least in my experience, I think it's like a hard chat. Like, I think it's hard to pin down, right? But it's sort of like, we know that design systems have such an immense impact, and being able to kind of like bottle it up and say this is exactly what it is, I think is yeah, it's difficult for sure. It's an interesting challenge.
So we're already halfway to the webinar. So there's one last question that I would like to ask to all the three of you. Do you have maybe what are your maybe your top 3 pro tips for anyone who, you know, wants to establish, you know, a design system community? It could be about tools, it could be about process, about best practices, anything that, you know, can be efficient or relevant.
Yep. I've got mine already. One of them is what I said before around like figure out your communication plan. That I think is one of like the key things that a lot of people don't think about. Figure out your communication plan, number 1. Number 2, figure out who is going to own community. And I do genuinely believe that you've got the best chance of doing it well if one sort of single person is like responsible or accountable for it. Don't want to get into bloody racy stuff now, but if you've got one person whose responsibility it is, it's more likely to get done, because, you know, something that is nobody's responsibility is, you know, never gonna, if it's everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. In terms of who that is, if you can't afford to resource to have a community manager, which is something that is happening more and more in design system teams, it usually sits with the like design system lead, and sometimes also the content person, if you have a content person, because they're good at communicating through words. It's quite often, you know, a good person to have. But you need somebody who, you know, kind of can easily speak up and sort of sideways. So they need to be able to communicate well to senior leadership, as well as communicate well sort of to peer teams as well. And then the third piece is like, be agile with it. Don't make something that's too onerous and too strict. And sort of reassess your processes, your like community processes as you go. If something isn't working after like a month, then consider dropping it or consider changing it, and sort of work off that, like, you know, product mindset of constant iteration and being scrappy. Like, the way to consider it, I like to think, is to think of it as being pre-product market fit. Like, that's how you should, if you're like establishing community for your design system, let's just assume that your design system is like pre-product market fit, in which case you need to be agile AF. And you need to be able to, like, you know, switch and change stuff and be scrappy and like try things out. And if they're not working, then feel free to scrap them.
Yeah. Love that. So I got distracted thinking, Luke, about your 3 tips. So I would say my 3 tips, I think they're a little bit more abstract, but I think, you know, really finding the right balance between having this sort of like open contribution model, and also knowing that like you have a system in place to help prioritize work. So like this sense of like, you don't want things to be too gated, right? Where it doesn't feel like you're building the sense of community. But also kind of having a plan in place so that it doesn't feel like it's just like scattered and it's difficult to prioritize and know kind of where to act in the right areas. I mean, definitely more to say, kind of more specifics around what we've seen work, but I think that that's something to consider for sure. The other thing I would say is like, don't try to have the design system, you know, be sort of perfect before you share and kind of make connections around it. right? Obviously, this will be different for each team, each organization. I realize not every company is going to be, maybe at the same kind of threshold of wanting things polished. But I think even like checking in with other teams, or like Sienna said, going to meetings and kind of getting feedback early is important. I think people like to kind of see and know some of the process, right? Even if it's not like a finished deliverable to kind of pass off. And the other thing is, I think remembering that like to treat this kind of community building aspect as well as just the design system, not as like this linear, like start point, end point project, right? That this is really kind of evolving, living and breathing, and kind of enjoying that process. And yeah, I think it just makes it kind of in the end more productive to not be like, okay, but when's the end? When is it done? Because the answer is it's not, right? It will grow and change with your product. So those would be mine.
Cool.
I think like for me, the top three would definitely be to meet people where they are. So definitely going to who your target audience is, meeting them there, and just kind of like getting them involved as soon as you can would definitely be like number one, as well as kind of echoing what Luke and Madeline said, definitely to like encourage feedback and collaboration. Like don't sit in an ivory tower. Like you want people to contribute and get involved and like feel like they have that ownership, because then that definitely helps with adoption and helps just grow your design system and design community in general as a whole. And then also third would probably be just to be patient, especially if design systems are completely new to your company. I've worked with some of our customers when they started out. Design in general was completely new, and it's taken time to get adopted and build that community. So I think don't expect it to happen overnight, but it can take time, definitely. So be patient.
Awesome. So we have a few questions from the audience. There's the first one I think that could be interesting is about the change that the design system can bring to an organization. It's a big topic. It's a question from Emily, saying that I love the focus on helping people understand our common purpose to help drive a community. And so do you have any tactical tips for the change management that comes with helping people shift their mindset to be contributors rather than just, consumers of the design system, I guess?
The one thing I've learned is don't dictate process. That's like one of the biggest ways to, one of the biggest learnings that I've had from like a change management perspective is I've definitely done it in the past where I've gone, here is the ideal contribution model and this is how people need to contribute. And now go and do it. And nothing happens. And I think part of it is one of the easiest ways to do effective change management is to make sure that folks are bought in all the way along. And so like bring them in to shape the process. Also understand that you're not going to get like everyone contributing. It is always going to be that you're going to have, you're going to have a bit of imbalance in contribution, and kind of like planning for that. But I do think that that's part of it. But it is I think part of it is around like building those champions. It's finding those champions in the company, and getting them to help shape that process, and basically like be your advocates out there and be your like they are your customer champions, right? Like they're the ones who are out there telling other folks how great it is to be able to like contribute. The other one is like reward. Figure out ways to provide reward. I kind of hate this because I think it's like I don't know, it's an inherently doomed thing to expect folks to like go above and beyond their core job for like warm and fuzzies, or I don't know, some chocolate, or whatever. Like if you're really serious about it, and you want to like do effective reward for contribution, make it part of their core job, or provide like core rewards. So money or status or, you know, promotion. There's a really great talk about this from Amy Hupe from the first Converge, around like how, I don't know, our models are broken because we're trying for like socialist models in an inherently capitalist system. That I definitely advise people go and watch, because it's way too complicated to get into in the 20 minutes we have left.
Oh man, I totally totally agree. I also do think I want to add like some color to that, which is that you mentioned kind of, Luke, like finding your champions. And I also think it's important to, when you know, you're talking about, you know, not everyone's going to contribute, or not everyone's going to be a champion. I think there's also ways to design a contribution process, right? But again, I'm not saying you have to throw on people, but like getting input about it. But that does cater to people that maybe are less prone to contribute, right? That like might say, I don't understand, like I don't know how to make kind of this like formatted, like correct contribution. I'm afraid to give feedback or to like touch this documentation because I don't really understand how the process works. So I do think there's like, there can be in certain teams a balance on the other side to say there like some more structure is helpful for getting more feedback for the people that maybe are less does that make sense?
I think that this is actually, it's a piece that I think is really important as well, around like keeping track of who's involved in your community, because it is unfortunately a really common thing that you end up getting whoever it is that's in power being the, like, making up the majority of the community, because there is like an inherent, you need an inherent sense of comfort and privilege to feel like that you can go above and beyond. And which is why I actually really advocate for like making rewards core rewards, as opposed to like you know, warm and fuzzy rewards, because it is like, you want to make sure that it's not just a bunch of, not to throw anyone under the bus, but a bunch of straight white dudes contributing to your design system. You want to make sure that you've got diverse representation there, and that you're actually representing your, you know, potential user base when you're building stuff for the design system. So you kind of do have to be mindful of that. And I definitely say to like track that, and talk to your community and figure out what you can do to make it so it is a more like friendly, inclusive, safe space. Because that's only going to benefit your product in the long run.
Totally. Totally. So sorry, my last thought on this is, and this is kind of could be obvious, but I think it is really powerful. I think when you act on feedback that you get, and people that are contributing can see that something has changed based on their feedback. Like, I know if there's any other product managers in this room, like, you know, people tend to stop giving feedback when they feel like nothing's changing, right? Or like that it's kind of this like this black hole that they're just kind of throwing things into. So I do think that Emily, a way of shifting that mindset of being contributors instead of just consumers is, and again, obviously you can't reply to everyone and make everyone happy all the time, but I think like when people start to see, oh, like this matters that I'm contributing, right? Like if I do give a bit of feedback, I'm seeing this change and grow is really motivating.
Well, on a similar note, we have a question about, you know, the contribution in the community, and it's a question from Ron, saying that you know, in terms of sourcing designers' contribution from the community of user back into the central team, how best can you do this without making it extra work onto designers' day-to-day work?
Oh lordy lord.
Yeah.
The problem is it's going to be extra work. Like, it is going to be extra work, unless so there's like a lot of talk about design systems product. If you like, if you're organized, if you can get your organization to a point where they see design systems as infrastructure, then it is like a core part of how everything works. Then it will be baked into the day-to-day work, right? Like, and that is what you should ultimately be aiming for. It's not easy though. It's like a hard thing to do. So I think that there's like part of it is around making sure that that process is catered to the people, as I said before. Like, make sure your processes are built in conjunction with the users of the design system. Part of it as well is like, I put it in the chat, but rethinking what a contribution actually is. You know, the fact that a contribution can be anything from a single line of text that is a, hey, it'd be nice if we had this, to, you know, a fully built component. And in fact, actually, I'd kind of personally, I'd probably stop before fully realized component, because I do think that that is, I will die on this hill, and I know I'm not the same as everyone else, but I think that that is the role of the core team to like build out the final components. And I think they should probably stop somewhere around the prototyping sort of phase, like wire, maybe a little bit like full fidelity prototype. But it is like defining that and also socializing the fact that those different levels of contribution are good and valid, and, you know, rewarding people for those contributions. And I think that, you know, probably again, like a little bit of a tip is like provide examples of what those different levels of contribution look like, and like how they're all valid, and you know, giving somebody an idea of like an example of what the different like levels of contribution are. I think is a good way to do that. But yeah, always move towards getting it into like infrastructure and making sure that like squads have 20% of their time dedicated to like, if you have like a federated approach, make sure, you know, your squads have X% of their time dedicated to like contributing to the design system, if like that's what you want to get to. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I had one other thought on this. I think the first, obviously, especially at zeroheight, we're thinking about these ways to like have this not be a time suck, right? And save people time and not have this feel like an extra bit of work. So all of that aside, so I think that like, yeah, process, or yeah, clarifying what a contribution is and how to be helpful and all of those things. But I do think that, you know, for example, on every tech team I've been on, like we have tech debt, right? Like we have tech sustainability that we think about. And yeah, maybe even more tech sustainability is a better comparison, where we don't really challenge that, right? Like we're like, yes, like this, that we need to do this. And obviously there are moments maybe when we're like, okay, we need to set that aside. But for the most part, that is kind of assumed. So I do think that it's a really interesting cultural shift as well, to say this isn't like, and again, this might not work for every company, but like that this isn't some bonus side hustle, like cute little side project that's like, oh, this is fun, like some, you know, someone's really geeking out in a design system, like that, this is cool, right? It's like, no, I think it will take some time, especially if your organization isn't there just yet, but to start seeing and valuing it as a assumed priority, as opposed to like, oh, but it's taking me too long, right?
Yeah.
But I realize that's like a bit of a, I mean, that's a big shift, but I do think that, at least for me, it tends to be the biggest, hardest blocker, you know, to kind of overcome, is just even that, yeah, that perspective on how much time a design system should even take.
If I can add in one extra thing from the 3 tips from before, I think I mentioned it slightly around having somebody who's like, if you can afford it and you've got the design, like if you've got people who are, you know, part of the core team, or whether that's like a guild or a centralized team, have one person who is really good at talking to senior leadership, have that be their like one of their priorities, is to make sure that whatever you're doing is sold into senior leadership in the right way. Again, it's like a lot of people assume that community is always like peer-based and like user-based. It can also be stakeholder-based. And so like, if you can afford it, have somebody whose responsibility is the peer community stuff, and one person who it is going up. Ideally the lead or whoever it is, but it's it helps with that stuff Madeline was just talking about. Again, these are learnings from having screwed it up real bad in the past. So.
Yeah, but that's the best way to learn, There's a question also from Jens about adoption. So very related to community in the end. Do you have any thoughts for how to be, an effective agent of change in a situation where the design system is already trending bad, centralized, autocratic, with significant lack of adoption? Any tricks for turning the ship around and create trust?
I'm letting someone else jump in before I automatically do.
Honestly, Luke or Sienna, I'm curious to hear what you have to say. I have thoughts, but
Yeah, I think.
Sienna?
Yeah, I think figuring out sort of like why it's trending there, or why people feel like they can't really contribute. Kind of maybe if you're able to do sort of like user research, if you're able to figure out like where it's going wrong, whether it's the design system isn't usable, like the format, the information architecture isn't working for them, how it's displayed, if they feel that they can't contribute. Kind of getting to the root of why it's trending that way will be the first step before you can make any changes to actually improve it. I think a big one, if you are able to do, is user research, like talking to the PMs or developers or designers and figuring out why it's not really working for them. And then coming up with a plan from there would be the first step.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think then also communicating that back out. It's what I've been talking about before, about making sure that you're openly communicating everything back in the right way and at the right times and to the right people. Like I think that communication is one of the only ways that you can build trust. I think another big piece of advice is to call out that this is happening. If you can get the team on board that you don't want to be, a dictatorship, then saying to the wider org, hey, we realize this has been happening, here are the steps that we're doing to improve this, and here's how we're tracking it even better, because I think that then that is a good way to like start accepting that you aren't on track and that you are failing in a way, is a good way to like show that humility that then shows that you're sort of like basically tearing it down to like build it back up again. In terms of the how to build it back up again, I mean it's an information game. It is like gathering the data, feeding that back in, maybe trying to get the bad person fired, maybe not, I don't know, but also like I think that sometimes it's really good as well to like lean on the community a little bit as well. And this is what I'm talking about, the outside community, not your design system community. Go and chat to other folks who run design systems and get I'm sure there are folks who have similar experiences. I know like Design System Slack has been like a really big a really great place to like get those same experiences and ask people what worked and what didn't work, but also just to go to somebody and be like, hey, this also happened at Stripe. I'm not saying that it did happen at Stripe, as a hypothetical example. This also happened to X company, and here's how they turned it around. Zeros as well, obviously. We've got good folks in there that can help as well. But and if reach out to us. If you ever, we've talked to so many bloody design systems companies that we possibly have somebody who's gone through similar. So please like reach out to us and we can like help put you in touch with folks.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that this kind of question is where thinking about your design system like a product can help a lot too. Where like, what would you, how would you handle it if, yeah, you launched a feature or, a kind of new section of the product and traction was shit and it just wasn't, where you needed it to be. What would be some of the first steps, right? And I think, I mean, yeah, it's obviously not doesn't mirror it exactly, but I do think that like the first steps get to be the same. And again, as a product manager, I forget that sometimes too when it comes to design systems. It's like, oh, but wait, like we know we know some of the steps, right? Like we know some of the steps, like Sienna and Luke both said, of starting to getting to the bottom of like what's going on and who thinks we're trending badly and what does that actually look like and what do people on the ground really think. So yeah.
I guess, on a similar topic, more about, getting people involved with your design system. There's a specific question from David asking, how do you get involved when you are on a team that has a mini group of 3 people leading within it? How do you get involved when you are not the lead, and how, you can get heard or involved?
No, this is culture. This is team culture. And it's I think like first step, make it known that you want to be involved, and make it known that you'd prefer to have open practices, and communicate that you're not happy with what's currently happening. I do think that like I think part of it is also like being self-aware and knowing, understanding like why it's set up in that way, what your motivations are for like wanting. Is it that you want to be part of that 3 or whatever it is? I'd actually like, because I think that, to be honest, like having a 3-pronged leadership team for a design system is actually how I'd probably set up a team. And it's more around like making sure that your processes are inclusive. So it might be that your processes aren't inclusive enough. If you're really interested in like that sort of like org design piece of like why teams are structured the way they are and how they should be structured and what the processes should be, there's an amazing book by Peter Mehrholtz and Kristen Skinner called Org Design for Design Orgs, which goes through a lot of this. Very easy read. And I'd recommend having a read of that just to like see if there's any suggestions in there, because I think that like design systems team quite often work in the same way that like a larger design org does. So there's a lot of like transferable practices there. But I think, as I said, like just make it known that you're not happy, and ask for things to be more transparent. And if you're not happy, then move on. The book was called now I've got to get it right. Org Design for Design Orgs. I'll put a link in the chat.
I don't have anything to add to that one, actually. I think that covered it for me anyway.
I guess maybe that's the last question that we are going to be able to answer with the time that we have left. I wanted to thank everyone for coming to this webinar, and especially to thank you all the 3 of you to answer all of our questions about how to build a community for your design system and foster adoption for your design system. I hope it was inspiring and helpful for everyone. Once again, feel free to join our community at zeroheight. It's called Zeros, where you can get in touch with a lot of zeroheight users, but also zeroheight folks, and you can also meet them in our upcoming event in Manchester on 21st September with our Converge conference. And yeah, we'll be happy to see you and to welcome you.
Make sure you get your tickets soon, though, because they are going very quickly. So
yeah, I can confirm. Thank you again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
I don't know how to get out of here, Sienna.